Hi, my name is Camille Lepause from the World Benchmarking Alliance, where I lead our work on human rights and more specifically, the corporate human rights benchmark. This videolog is one of a few that introduce a webinar series on the corporate responsibility to respect human rights. This webinar series is organized by the Investor Alliance for Human Rights and will take place in 2022. In this short videolog, I am going to talk about how human rights, the SDGs and ESG, terms often used interchangeably, all fit together. With the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark, or CHRB, we have been benchmarking some of the largest global companies on their human rights disclosures and practices since 2017. We make the benchmark results publicly available to stimulate a positive competition between companies, a race to the top. And one question that we frequently get from both companies and investors who use the benchmark is how human rights and the SDGs fit together, or how ESG and the SDGs relate. Human rights are fundamental rights and freedoms inherent to all human beings. They range from the most fundamental, the right to life, to those that make life worth living, such as the right to food, education, work, health, or liberty. Human rights are relevant to many in business contexts in many different ways. For example, a company's health and safety policy is a human rights matter because through that policy, the company seeks to respect its workers' right to safe and healthy working conditions, as well as their right to life. The Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone, everywhere. The 17 goals were adopted by all UN member states in 2015 as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The 2030 Agenda provides a comprehensive and universal framework uniting the environmental, social, and economic dimensions of sustainable development. So how do human rights and the SDGs fit together? Well, first, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development affirms that the SDGs seek to realize the human rights of all. According to the Danish Institute for Human Rights, 92% of the SDG targets are linked to international human rights instruments. The cross-cutting principle of leaving no one behind, which is central to the 2030 Agenda, strongly reflects human rights principles of equality and non-discrimination. The UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights noted in 2018 that for businesses, the most powerful contribution to sustainable development is to embed respect for human rights in their activities and across their value chains, addressing harm done to people and focusing on the potential and actual impacts. So respect for human rights is crucial to achieving the 2030 Agenda. And this is why at the World Benchmarking Alliance, we are embedding human rights into all of our SDG benchmarks, because we know that no company can make a positive contribution to the achievement of the SDGs if it doesn't manage its human rights risks and impacts adequately. So to summarize, human rights and the SDGs are tied together in a mutually reinforcing way. Respect for human rights and the achievement of the SDGs are inseparable, like two sides of a coin. ESG factors, or environmental, social, and governance factors, are used to evaluate companies and countries on how sustainable they are. The term is often used in an investment context by financial institutions interested in tracking the sustainability of their own investment activities. In some ways, ESG is broader than human rights, which would normally be included under the S of ESG, social. However, corporate respect for human rights relies on certain governance steps being taken, and it is also increasingly recognized that environmental matters and human rights questions are strongly interconnected. Human rights are therefore not narrowly constrained to the S in ESG, even though this is the most natural entry point of ESG to consider human rights topics. So in summary, the SDGs, ESG, and human rights are very closely connected concepts. They differ in their exact scope, or the angle taken, or which stakeholders mostly use them, but they go hand in hand. There is no achieving the SDGs without human rights, and good ESG practices require respect for human rights. For the purposes of the upcoming webinar series on the corporate responsibility to respect, the important conclusion of this videolog is that human rights underpin the SDGs and ESG, and therefore should be understood as a central component to both. Thank you, and I wish you a good rest of the day.